Hello, everyone. I'm really pleased to have Professor Vijay Govindarajan on the show today. Professor Vijay Govindarajan is a Coxe Distinguished Professor at Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth College and an Executive Fellow at Harvard Business School. He's a New York Times and Wall Street Journal best-selling author, and his most recent book is a three-box solution. VG was named by Thinkers 50 as a top 3 management thinker in the world and received the Breakthrough Innovation Award. He's a keynote speaker in events such as the Business Week CEO Forum, TED, and World Economic Forum. It's an absolute pleasure to have him here. Welcome, Professor VG.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be here, join you.
The pandemic has forced companies to innovate, and they had to really be creative to manage their day-to-day priorities, going virtual, and at the same time, they had to reinvent for an uncertain future. So there have been a lot of learnings. Companies, some have done exceedingly well, others have not done as well. How do you think companies responded to this crisis, and what could they have done better?
You see, I call pandemic is one of those events which are truly black swan events. They are really nonlinear and fundamental change. And if you really think about it, if you go back in history, whenever there was a black swan event, then people try to respond in ways which they resisted until that point in time. They are forced to respond because of the nonlinear event. And then what happens is, post the crisis, there is always a fundamental change. Take, for instance, World War II. The British men who are working in factories had to go to war. So somebody had to do the factory job. Reluctantly, they recruited women to do factory jobs. Post World War II, what they realized were women not only did those jobs, many of them were very, very good at it. Women's movement has never looked back since that time. Pandemic is one such event. As you rightly said, almost every organization were forced to experiment. Take my own industry, education. If our dean had told us 3 years ago, hey guys, all of you should teach on Zoom, there would have been a revolt, to put it mildly. But in 5 days, we all went on Zoom. But that is for business continuity. We were forced. The key question is, post-pandemic, what should be a permanent change educational institutions should embrace, which they can incorporate with their business model that they used before pandemic, but then augment and strengthen the business model? That is the key question.
Yeah, I think all of these are key points which can benefit companies. What I have observed is when companies are forced with some of these innovations, it is very difficult to sustain this in the longer run. Some of these become a practice, but many of these companies revert back to the earlier, whatever was business as usual or the old normal. How can executives who see that a change is beneficial for the company, they've seen this during the pandemic, how can they sustain that innovation?
I think I have this framework, three-box solution, which is exactly addresses this question. And as you rightly say, box one, which is your core business, is where people go back to. And box two, box three is the new business model. And during pandemic, we were forced to do things. But post-pandemic, the tendency is to go back to business as usual. There are a lot of universities, just taking my own industry as an example. Once the pandemic got over, they said, my God, that nuisance is finished. So let's go back to face-to-face classroom. I say, that's a mistake, because there is something very interesting about digital technologies. That doesn't mean the residential experience should be given up. But how do you use that? That a lot of universities do not do. And that is a normal human tendency, because if you think about it, most of the people and most of the resources are tied up in your box one core business. Something what I call dominant logic. There is a dominant logic amongst universities. And that dominant logic says, hey, you got to be on campus and you got to attend classes in person. That is the best way to deliver education. And that dominant logic is what The faculty who teach buy into it, the students buy into it, etc. So it's very difficult to change the dominant logic. So that's the main problem.
Yeah, totally agreed. My work in AI, I've seen organizations revert back to the dominant logic in various ways. Even when they embrace technologies like AI, they do it in a piecemeal fashion. They do it in projects. Some people hope that it doesn't disrupt their entire business. So, how can innovation be applied mainstream within the organization? And what would you advise executives to do? You talked about box one taking the precedence, box three, which is the business of the future. How can that become mainstream, and how do you transition a company towards that?
I think the key issue is leadership. I think the CEO has to feel the need to change the company. And the transformation is not a revolution. By that I mean you throw the old and embrace the new. Transformation is a journey. Therefore, if you are CEO of Rolls-Royce, you have to have a point of view about the year 2030. And that point of view has to say digital transformation, because Rolls-Royce essentially sells a physical product. They sell aircraft engine and then service the aircraft engine. That's their box one business today. And they have to have a point of view for year 2030 that says we have to create new source of value using software. Strategy is not about what you do in the future. Strategy is about what you do today to create that future. I'm not asking companies to invest billions of dollars. Start a small experiment in the software business. And then it is a question of testing assumptions and pivoting your way to a workable new business model.
Yeah, very well said. And the last 5 years, there have been surveys which call out the biggest challenges that CEOs and chief data officers face. Organizational culture was the topmost one in every single one of those surveys. Most projects fail because the adoption by the end users is poor. Change management is tough. And you rightly mentioned for AI, this is the biggest stumbling block. In your book, you talk about box two, which fits in well into this point we're talking about. Can you elaborate on how they can address this challenge?
Yeah, box one is manage the present. That's your core business. Box two is selectively forget the past, and box three is create the future. And box three is the new business model. Without box two, box three will never happen. In fact, working with organizations, what I have found of my three boxes, the box that is the most difficult is box two. Box two is about forgetting, and box three is about learning. If you can't forget, you can't learn. As simple as that. Again, think about how many books we have written on learning organizations. We haven't written a single book on forgetting organizations. What you need to forget is the dominant logic. That is why, if you're General Motors, you want to create a self-driving car. It will never happen inside your gasoline-powered, internal combustion-driven automobile business unit. It'll never happen. But today, 99% of your sales are in your core business, and the core business has a dominant logic. Mechanical engineers, dealership, all kinds of principles that govern the current automobile. Therefore, in order to forget the dominant logic, you have to create the dedicated team. So box two, when you create a dedicated team, essentially you're responding to box two. And that's why General Motors has got Cruise Automation, which is their self-driving car division in Silicon Valley. The majority shareholder, SoftBank has invested, Honda has invested, but Cruise Automation is a separate business. But Cruise Automation is also connected to the mothership, and the mothership connection is going to create an awful lot of conflicts. Because the people in Cruise Automation are paid differently, they are younger, they have different skills. You're recruiting AI and other people. A person who joins a top artificial intelligence expert who you're trying to attract to your self-driving car division Cruise in Silicon Valley, he's not comparing, should I join General Motors or Ford? He's saying, should I join General Motors or Google? So you got to pay him differently. Right. And That compensation is different what you pay to people in your units in Detroit. And those are all the conflicts you got to manage.
I think that's a great point. The other critical aspect I've seen for AI transformations to succeed is collaboration across the organization. So AI needs orchestrated efforts from multiple people across different skills. What are some best practices that companies have adopted for fostering collaboration?
Let me answer your question by first stepping back, giving a view of why digital transformation is such a big deal. By the way, there are only two ways by which companies build competitive advantage: scale and scope. If you think about industrial era companies and companies like Ford, General Motors, General Electric, Rolls-Royce, P&G, a whole lot of companies came into existence. And that was a golden era where industrial companies really drove growth in this country. And they drove growth two means: scale and scope. What do we mean by that? Scale is number of cars you produce and sell. If you produce and sell more cars, your top line sales revenue goes up. That is scale. Scale is a market share measure. But scale-based growth is always linear and gradual. Why? Because if you want to increase your market share, you have to build factories. You have to build dealership. You have to spend money on marketing. You can do all of that, but it takes time to build factories. It takes time to build dealership because these are physical assets. The second way industrial companies grew was through scope. If you take a look at an industrial era company like Procter & Gamble, scale-based growth for them would be number of units of laundry detergent you produce and sell. Now, suppose you want to grow your top line more than the number of units of laundry detergent you produce and sell, they can enter adjacent industries. So now P&G enters disposable diapers.
Okay.
Therefore, now their sales revenue is not just dependent on number of units they sell in laundry detergent, it also includes number of units they sell in disposable diapers. But scope-based growth is also linear and gradual because P&G can only enter adjacent industries. P&G can't enter automobiles. So their core competence, one of their core competencies is distribution know-how, because they send the laundry detergent to grocery stores. But that is also linear and gradual. What is happening in digital era is digital companies like Google and Amazon, etc., they also only grow through scale and scope, but they grow exponentially. Their growth is non-linear and exponential, whereas industry era companies, their growth was linear and gradual. Why? That is because for General Motors, scale-based growth is number of units of cars they produce and sell. Whereas for Uber, their scale is the number of cars in their network. That is why their growth is exponential. Digital companies can enter every industry because their core competence is data. It is software. It is analytics. The core competency of digital companies is fundamentally different. Therefore, if you're an industrial company, when you formulate your strategy, before you even think of AI and data science, you have to first formulate a strategy about how you're going to grow your scale and scope at breakneck speed. That is what they don't do. Therefore, most of the efforts, digital transformation efforts, are only in name.
Yeah, understood. I think the distinction is clear. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. On that note, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I'll take this learning to heart and I'll remember that. So it's been a pleasure talking to you, Professor Vijay. Thank you for being on this show.
It's all my pleasure and look forward to seeing your article.